Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be focusing on the Egyptian-Kuwaiti relations in light of the visit by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to Kuwait today. It was a one-day visit. We're going to be talking about what's been discussed and the highlights of such a visit and the prospects of strengthening the relations between Egypt and Kuwait. But before we start doing that, let's check out some of the main stories making the news today. Now, during his one-day state visit to Kuwait, and the president already came back home, the visit comes within the framework of the special brotherly Egyptian-Kuwaiti ties and cooperation on all fronts. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi stressed on Tuesday that Kuwait and Gulf states' security and stability are part and parcel of Egypt's national security. President al-Sisi held talks with Kuwait's Emir Sheikh Nawaf al-Ahmad al-Jaber al-Sabah, saying Egypt is looking forward to expanding cooperation with Kuwait in the political, security, economic and commercial fields. The president valued the level of coordination and consensus between the two countries regarding issues of mutual interest, confirming that he is determined to promote the joint Arab action. For his part, Prince Nawaf cited the close and historic bilateral ties, expressing his appreciation to Egypt's efforts to support Kuwait issues and development. He said Kuwait would expand its investments in Egypt and exploit available investment opportunities in the coming stage, praising Egypt's role in strengthening the joint Arab action on the face of crises and challenges facing the region. The Kuwaiti prince hailed Egypt as a role model in maintaining stability and advancing development at the social and economic levels. The two sides reviewed the role played by the 13th round of the Egyptian-Kuwaiti Joint Committee, as well as collaborating efforts to combat terrorism and extremism, as well as spreading the culture of tolerance. And also, during his visit today, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi met with the Kuwaiti Prime Minister, Sabah al-Khalid al-Sabah, on Tuesday. Now, the president praised the historic ties that bind Egypt and Kuwait at both the diplomatic and popular levels and their era-long cultural and social engagement. The head of state said Egypt is looking forward to enhancing and sustaining the relationship of economic integration and strategic cooperation with Kuwait in light of the huge security and socio-economic crises hitting the region. For his part, the Kuwaiti premier expressed interest in upgrading cooperation with Egypt into a strategic partnership in order to establish a cornerstone for maintaining regional security and stability and restore regional balance. The meeting reviewed means of pushing economic relations ahead of the approaching Joint High Committee meeting between Egypt and Kuwait. And also today, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi congratulated the Saudi King Salman bin Abdulaziz and Crown Prince Mohammed over the founding day. Now, the president said the event reflects the historical depth of Saudi Arabia and the path of development and renaissance witnessed on all fronts under its wise leadership, expressing wishes for security and more development and prosperity for Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia held celebrations to commemorate for the first time its foundation nearly 300 years ago. The government lined up events that include musical performances on Saudi modern history, fireworks, drone shows and sound effects, with 3,500 performers taking part. The anniversary marks the day in 1727 when Mohammed bin Saud, founder of the first Saudi state, took over the emirate of Diriyah, and a remote town which now lies on the northwest edge of the Saudi capital Riyadh. A royal decree last month declared February 22nd an official holiday known as Founding Day, to be commemorated every year in recognition of the commencement of the reign of Imam Mohammed bin Saud and marking the start of the first Saudi state. These were some of the stories making the news today, but now focusing our attention on the President's visit to Kuwait. Let's check out this report regarding the visit, and we'll be right back to shed more light on it.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi paid a visit to Kuwait on Tuesday for talks with His Highness Kuwait's Emir Sheikh Nawaf Al Ahmed Al Jaber Al Sabah. President el-Sisi was accompanied by a high-level delegation, during which he reviewed the Kuwaiti Emir's means to enhance bilateral relations in various domains, as well as a number of regional and international issues of mutual concern. The President hailed deep historical relations between Egypt and Kuwait at all levels, stressing that Egypt's support for the stability of Kuwait and the entire Gulf region is part of Egypt's national security. President el-Sisi expressed hope to increase trade and joint investment projects between Egypt and Kuwait, and said Egypt is keen to communicate with Kuwaiti investors in order to support their activities in Egypt and overcome any obstacles they face. The meeting tackled ways to support the Egyptian-Kuwaiti Business Council in its efforts to increase communication and interaction between business leaders in the two countries, reviewing available investment opportunities and discussing joint projects, especially in the fields of infrastructure, clean energy and water desalination. Also, Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune and his accompanying delegation visited Kuwait for talks with the Kuwaiti Emir. 2 days ago, President el-Sisi met with the visiting Kuwaiti National Assembly Speaker Marzouk Al-Ghanem in the presence of the Egyptian Parliament Speaker Hanafi Gebeli. The talks in Cairo took up different aspects of bilateral relations and the latest regional developments. During the meeting, President el-Sisi lauded Egyptian-Kuwaiti ties, reiterating Cairo's commitment to further advancing cooperation between the two countries at all levels. This includes strengthening Egyptian-Kuwaiti parliamentary ties. The head of state welcomed Ghanem and conveyed his greetings to Kuwaiti Emir and Crown Prince Sheikh Nawaf Al Ahmed Al Jaber Al Sabah. The President further lauded the firm and robust Egyptian-Kuwaiti relations, which enjoy special characteristics. For his part, the Kuwaiti official conveyed greetings of the Kuwaiti Emir and Crown Prince to President el-Sisi, affirming that his country is proud of its strong historical ties with Egypt.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and to shed more light on today's visit by President el-Sisi to Kuwait, we're joined in the studio by Mr. Mohammed Sabreen, the Egyptian writer. Mr. Sabreen, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Sabreen, now everybody knows the strong historical brotherly ties between Egypt and Kuwait. Now, the President making a visit, a one-day visit, he already came back, meeting Sheikh Nawaf Al Ahmed Al Jaber Al Sabah. What is the significance and the importance of the timing of such a visit, this visit taking place this point in time?
As you mentioned, the relationship between Egypt and Kuwait is a very special one. It goes back to the 40s. And we have a lot of good memories and a lot of good things. And we do have a special regard to Kuwait. So from this angle, it is very important, to keep in touch and keep the dialogue running between Egypt and Kuwait on the highest level. Mm-hmm. But the importance of this visit is actually Egypt is sending, a very strong signal that, that Egypt is looking and caring and in very deep consultation with its own brothers and sisters, mm-hmm. especially in the Gulf area and before, the Arab Summit. Mm-hmm. I think it is normal, this kind of consultation and discussion. And given the fact that the international community is actually in a very tense situation, given the Ukraine crisis and the oil things, so there is a lot of things which is very important to keep context and dialogue between Egyptian leader and Kuwaiti leader.
Yes, well, this visit, it's coming in a time where also the Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune has made a visit to Kuwait as well. And on Sunday, President Sisi received the Kuwait's National Assembly Speaker, Marzouk al-Ghanem. Now, so it seems that Kuwait is really trying to strengthen its relations and really stamp its own political presence, be it with Egypt, be it with Kuwait, having the presidential level visit and also dealing with the General Assembly, the Kuwaiti General Assembly Speaker. Now, you've mentioned that we are in a time where there's a lot of political developments and imbalances that are taking place around the region. And during the meeting today, the Kuwaiti Emir stressed, and the Prime Minister as well, stressed on having Egypt play its role in supporting Kuwait and having some sort of a balance within the region, within the imbalances taking place there. What are we prepping for, and what is Kuwait really trying to prep for, and what sort of balance do they mean, having these relations and the visits with the Egyptian president, the Algerian president? What are we prepping for?
Kuwait is and Kuwait leadership are very wise, and Kuwait is actually taking a very distinguished line, mm-hmm. Which is moderation, and not to rush.
To strengthen our Baltic allies, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Let me be clear, these are totally defensive moves on our part. We have no intention of fighting Russia. We want to send an unmistakable message, though, that the United States, together with our allies, will defend every inch of NATO territory and abide by the commitments we made to NATO. We still believe that Russia is poised to go much further in launching a massive military attack against Ukraine. Hope I'm wrong about that, hope we're wrong about that, but Russia has only escalated its threat against the rest of Ukrainian territory, including major cities and including the capital city of Kyiv. There are still well over 150,000 Russian troops surrounding Ukraine. And as I said, Russian forces remain positioned in Belarus to attack Ukraine from the north, including warplanes and offensive missile systems. Russia's moved troops closer to Ukraine's border with Russia. Russia's naval vessels are maneuvering in the Black Sea to Ukraine's south, including amphibious assault ships, missile cruisers, and submarines. Russia's moved supplies of blood and medical equipment into position on their border. You don't need blood unless you plan on starting a war. Over the last few days, we've seen much of the playbook that Secretary Blinken laid out last week in the United Nations Security Council come to pass. A major increase in military provocations and false flag events along the line of contact in the Donbass. Dramatically staged, conveniently on-camera meeting of Putin's Security Council to grandstand for the Russian public. And now, political provocation of recognizing sovereign Ukrainian territory as so-called independent republics in clear violation, again, of international law. President Putin has sought authorization from the Russian parliament to use military force outside of Russian territory. And this set the stage for further pretexts of further provocations by Russia to try to justify further military action. None of us should be fooled. None of us will be fooled. There is no justification. Further Russian assault in Ukraine remains a severe threat in the days ahead. And if Russia proceeds, it is Russia and Russia alone that bears the responsibility. As we respond, my administration is using every tool at our disposal to protect American businesses and consumers from rising prices at the pump. As I said last week, defending freedom will have cost for us as well and here at home. We need to be honest about that. But as we do this, I'm going to take robust action to make sure the pain of our sanctions is targeted at the Russian economy, not ours. We're closely monitoring energy supplies for any disruption. We're executing a plan in coordination with major oil-producing consumers and producers toward a collective investment to secure stability in global energy supplies. This will blunt gas prices. I want to limit the pain the American people are feeling at the gas pump. This is critical to me. In the last few days, I've been in constant contact with European leaders, including with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Vice President Harris met in person with the leaders in Germany over the weekend at the Munich conference, including President Zelensky. At every step, we have shown the United States and our allies and partners are working in unison, which he hasn't been counting on, Mr. Putin. We're united in our support of Ukraine. We are united in our opposition to Russian aggression. And we're united in our resolve to defend our NATO alliance. And we're united in our understanding of the urgency and seriousness of the threat Russia is making to global peace and stability. Yesterday, the world heard clearly the full extent of Vladimir Putin's twisted rewrite of history, going back more than a century, as he waxed eloquently, noting that, well, I'm not going to go into it, but nothing in Putin's lengthy remarks indicate any interest in pursuing real dialogue on European security in the year 2022. He directly attacked Ukraine's right to exist. He indirectly threatened territory formerly held by Russia, including nations that today are thriving democracies and members of NATO. He explicitly threatened war unless his extreme demands were met. And there is no question that Russia is the aggressor. So we're clear-eyed about the challenges we're facing. Nonetheless, there is still time to avert the worst-case scenario that will bring untold suffering to millions of people if they move as suggested. The United States and our allies and partners remain open to diplomacy if it is serious. When all is said and done, we're going to judge Russia by its actions, not its words. And whatever Russia does next, we're ready to respond with unity, clarity, and conviction. We'll probably have more to say about this as it moves on. I'm hoping diplomacy is still available. Thank you all very much.
Sir, are you still open to meeting with Vladimir Putin, sir?
The Houthi rebels and militia. Now, this is an issue that is directly and specifically affecting the GCC countries, including Kuwait. Now, it has been a conflict that's been going on for a few years, and we've seen the Houthis not just targeting places and locations in Saudi Arabia, but also stemming out to the United Arab Emirates. Now, what is the situation there? How can Egypt help cement the position of Kuwait and the GCC countries? What can be done to sort of calm things down and maybe even, hopefully, put an end to such a conflict?
I think, the most important message to, especially to, to the Houthi and the one who are behind the Houthi, that there is no any military solution. This is the word Houthi and whatever who are behind them, they can't win. So the sooner is the better, just to come to a rational conclusion and sit in the negotiation table and try to reach, a peaceful solution, because it is very clear. Egypt is supporting, the Gulf countries, and it will not tolerate any harm to any of its any Gulf country, because as we mentioned, and as President Sisi stated several times, that the security of the Gulf is part of the national security of Egypt. So the message is very clear, but on the other hand, we are supporting a peaceful solution. We are supporting and encouraging the other party to settle down and sit to the negotiation table and to start negotiating in a very serious manner, because whatever they are doing is not going to take them anywhere.
Well, it has been going on for some time, and Egypt has made it clear many times that it does support a diplomatic and peaceful solution, but the strikes keep on happening and taking place, the drone attacks, and it's not just Saudi Arabia, it's the UAE and many other countries. Do you feel that the other side of the spectrum is also, or would be able to consider such a peaceful and diplomatic solution between both sides?
I think, there is some analysis right now saying that, if the Americans and 5+1 are going to reach, a deal with Iran around its nuclear file, they said, the next step is actually negotiation, and it's already declared that, the Saudi Arabia and Iran actually are looking for the 5th round of negotiation. So there is some kind of hope that maybe we could, have some of the regional power are coming to consensus and start to do business, and if they did manage to have a solution to the nuclear issue, maybe the issues, which is the regional one, and we have to convince that Iran are not hiding; they are supporting Houthi, and so by this regard, I think they are a player, and hopefully that we could reach a solution, but a solution which is not affecting the Arab interests or the national security of the whole of the Arab countries, and especially the Gulf one.
Well, the influence of Iran, Iran has been trying to establish its own influence on the North African and Arab region, also the Gulf region, for some time now, and it seems that it has its own influences within within many of the different countries and different states in different ways. Now, the Gulf has been quite concerned about the influence of Iran on the region. Now, how do you try and not end the influence, but at least contain it, or at least understand where it starts and where it ends? Is it by finding some sort of an agreement and a consensus regarding the nuclear agreement? Because still, up until today and yesterday, Iran is still adamant that it demands that the US lifts its strict and hard economic sanctions and measures. Do you think that that's where it should start, by trying to broker a deal? And if it does not, because everybody seems some sort of at a loggerhead, do you feel that the situation could stay the same for quite some time and maybe even get worse if we're assuming the worst case scenario?
You know, a lot of people who know, and also, you know, Western diplomats and officials and a lot of writers and officials in Arab countries, when they are spoken about Iran, they said, what do you like to see from Iran? Mm-hmm. They say, we would like Iran to transfer itself to be a normal country and to live as a normal country. Mm-hmm. And to get rid of one stage, which is a revolutionary Iran. Mm-hmm. You know, this is one stage in the history of Iran. Start to play in the regional area as a normal state and stop intervening, you know, in the domestic affairs of its neighbors, and try to take some steps to build the confidence with mm-hmm. its own neighbors. Confidence is not a given thing. It is something you have to work in it and to earn it. Mm-hmm. So they should do a lot of steps, you know, to earn the confidence. If they want, they speak a lot of time about, we would like to have a normal and good relation with Saudi Arabia and you know, United Arab Emirates and the rest of the Arab countries. So, okay, it's fine, but you have to prove it. Mm-hmm. You have to behave in a normal way. So, by this coming deal, I think the international community and also the countries in the region are giving Iran a second chance to behave as a normal country and as a pragmatic mm-hmm. country and sit on the negotiation table, because what Iran is doing is sabotaging, you know, a lot of issues. Mm-hmm. Not solving anything, not reaching anything, and keep, you know, the instability is running and running and running. Mm-hmm. It took us nowhere.
Yes.
They didn't achieve anything, mm-hmm. Except that Iran is actually a force of instability. They managed to succeed in you know, doing these things and making a lot of troubles. Mm-hmm. So if they want to have the trust, if they want to be given, you know, a role in the region and accepted as a normal and loving peace country, mm-hmm. they have to do something and start by, you know, I think the Yemen file is you know, the first issue. They could actually do something.
But do you feel that changing the political strategy and direction of Iran, do you think that this is actually a possibility, or is it more like wishful thinking?
In politics, they say never say never. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I'm saying such a thing, because, you know, Imam Khomeini has actually, you know, accepted the ceasefire with Iraq, and he said, you know, I have to, you know, to take the poison. Mm-hmm. So actually, you know, their symbol of revolutionary things was a very pragmatic one. You know, at one stage he decided that he can continue forever to fight with Iraq, and he decided to accept the ceasefire. So hopefully that, you know, the leaders of Iran reach the conclusion that, you know, it is a time, you know, to sit down and start to behave normally and start to reach to their own neighbors and start to negotiating in a good faith. There is no other solution.
But when Iran was already part of the 2015 nuclear agreement, it was part of the agreement with the 5+1 world powers. Do you feel that their attitude or their politics or diplomacy was much different than it is now?
I think, you know, what is different now is, you know, that the rest of the international community are not, you know, feel strong supporting Iran. I think even the European right now and the rest, they are actually blaming Iran that, you know, maybe Iran is not cooperating fully with the international community, and Iran should do more. So they are not accepting, you know, the narrative of Iran. Yeah. They are suspicious. So this is a big difference. If you don't have sympathy, if you do have a lot of doubt in your shoulder, I think you have to notice and take care of this development.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Egypt is playing its role politically in strengthening the relationship with Kuwait and the GCC countries as a whole, but also there's a lot of economic and cooperation work taking place between Egypt and Kuwait. Let's check out this report regarding the bilateral ties between Egypt and Kuwait, and we'll be right back.
Egyptian ambassador to Kuwait, Osama Shaltut, asserted that Egyptian-Kuwaiti relations set an example in bilateral ties between the two countries. Shaltut said that Egypt strongly supports the security and stability of Kuwait. During his meeting with board chairman of a Kuwaiti newspaper, Youssef Khaled al-Marzouk, Shaltut said Egypt takes distinguished steps towards comprehensive economic developments and has reached huge accomplishments in the era of President Sisi. He further added the Egyptian economy has achieved an unprecedented quantum leap. Shaltut pointed out to a number of huge development projects done by the government to support and boost social life of Egyptians, topped by the Decent Life Initiative, removal of slums, renovation of villages and canal lining. For his part, Marzouk lauded the strong historic ties between Egypt and Kuwait and the leap witnessed in Egyptian economy. Last November, during a 3-day visit to Kuwait, Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry met with senior Kuwaiti officials. After congratulating the new emir inviting him to visit Egypt, Shoukry stressed that any attempts to disrupt Egyptian-Kuwaiti relations, which he described as strong and special, were destined to fail. The top diplomat met with Sheikh Nawaf al-Ahmad al-Jabir al-Sabbah, the new emir of Kuwait, during which he delivered an invitation from President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to visit Egypt and extended his congratulations to the new crown prince. He also met with Kuwaiti counterpart Sheikh Ahmed al-Nasser al-Sabbah and the Prime Minister Sheikh Sabbah Khaled al-Hamad al-Sabbah. During the discussions for the Joint Ministerial Committee preparations, which oversee bilateral cooperation, and a failure to reach a binding agreement on filling and operating Ethiopia's dam was also discussed.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Continuing our discussion with Mr. Sabreen regarding the Egyptian-Kuwaiti bilateral relations and the visit of President Sisi today to Kuwait. Sir, now, in their statements, both Sheikh Nawaf and President Sisi have mentioned the importance of really strengthening the cultural and social and economic cooperation. And even Sheikh Nawaf mentioned that, and the Prime Minister as well, they've spoken about trying to find more investment opportunities in Egypt. Now, if Egypt is using its political weight and political influence and trying to achieve some sort of a balance within, political balance within the region, do you feel that in return Egypt would also benefit from more Kuwaiti investments in Egypt?
I think, you know, Egypt, its own role and its own commitment, without any, from the start. Egypt is doing this because from its own conventions, that its own duty. And if you go back to the 40s and 50s, and we send a lot of educational materials and teachers. And
yes.
And so our commitment to Kuwait and to the Gulf and the rest of the Arab countries is very important. Without,
yes, it's a given without any.
Without, you know, the normal formula with the rest of the world.
Yes.
By saying that, you know, we have to look to Egypt right now. I think, you know, everyone, you know, notice that Egypt is in its own merits is a big opportunity. You know, given the fact, you know, the oil and gas, you know, the green energy, you know, the mega project of infrastructure and, you know, you name it.
Yes.
And a lot the importance of location, and which is a lot of countries are considering to produce in Egypt and export to the rest of the world. So there is a lot of desalination, you know, given the fact that Egypt needs more and more fresh water.
Yes.
And going back to the history, Kuwait is one of important investor in Egypt. So they already know the, you know, the Egyptian market. They do have a good relation with the market. And also, you know, the Egyptian who are contributing to the development of Kuwait, you know. You know, the Egyptian community inside Kuwait now, you know, the figure is around 800,000, you know, in Kuwait. And they are doing wonderful job. And, you know, the Kuwaiti officials are appreciating what the Egyptians are doing to the development process in Kuwait. But if you notice that in the recent days, you know, a lot of big American companies are actually increasing, you know, their investment in Egypt, and the Chinese and the South Korean. So in Egypt, there is a lot of good opportunities. So by this regard, you know, on the merits, it is important. It is going to be high rewarding investment, and it is important that we share with our brothers, you know, this important. And the Kuwaitis official actually declare and express their own admiration about, you know, the full-scale development was in Egypt. So it is very true, you know. It's a new republic. We are in a process of a new republic, which is already, you know, if you go around in Egypt, you know, construction is everywhere.
Yes.
So it is very important.
Yes. Well, Also, in today's visit, the two sides reviewed the work of the 13th Joint Egyptian-Kuwaiti Joint Committee, and they spoke about the efforts this committee is exerting in the files of combating terrorism, extremism, and really spreading the culture of tolerance. How big of a role and what kind of a role is the Egyptian-Kuwaiti Joint Committee doing, and what can it do to really help with the social awareness and the cultural efforts and awareness that are being exerted at such a critical time in such a critical region?
Yeah, from this regard, I think the Arab countries are the ones who suffer more from extremism, from terrorism, which is coming, and violence, and which the sources are coming from a very narrow and very rigid interpretation of Islam and accepting the other, which is actually totally at the odds of the whole history and the whole nature of Egyptians and the rest of the Arab people. So from this regard, this is a big issue. I think Egypt and Kuwait and the rest needs to work together, because it is very important for the safety of the society, and also to create the condition, stability and tolerance. It is a very important condition for whatever you would like to do in this society. There is no development without stability. There is no development if there is no security and these things. So from this regard, and also the image, the image of Arab and Muslims around the world, you need to change it or to fix it from inside the Arab countries, because this is actually affecting everything, affecting people to come to the Arab countries, investing in the Arab countries, receiving the Arabs and Muslims in the rest of the world. So we need to change the image and try to submit the true image of the Arabs and the Muslims, that they are living and peaceful people.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the visit by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to Kuwait today, this one-day visit, it had a lot of political, economic dimensions, as well as cultural and social dimensions, as explained by Mr. Sabreen. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. Before we go, I'd like to thank my distinguished guest, Mr. Mohammed Sabreen, the Egyptian writer. Mr. Sabreen, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.